Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. So Journey Together is finally here, and Atlanta Regionals is going to be the first tournament where we can start slinging down these new cards. We have had the online tournaments going on for over a week now, and we're starting to get a good picture of what the top contenders are. Of course, there's also the Champions League that we've had a few months back, so lots of things to go off of and base our ideas off in the post-rotation format with the new introductions from Journey Together. Myself and Jack are going to be going over a tier list and also talk about the meta percentages of these decks as we go for these first few tournaments in this format, because lots of interesting stuff. We're getting to the business end of the season as well, where it's make or break time for the invites. So Jack, do you want to kick us off with any of the decks that we have here? We're only really talking about, well, it's 15 decks that we have here. It's pretty much the top contenders. There's still maybe archetypes that emerge and prove themselves to be top contenders, but these are really the things being played a lot online right now and seem to have a good amount of logic behind them as to why they're going to be on our tier list today.
Yeah, so I'm going to kick off with Poison Archaludon. It's actually the deck I've played by far the most, and I think it's an A tier deck. I actually think it emerged kind of towards the end of like the Japanese meta and stuff like that, and towards the end of our last meta. And I think people were kind of curious to see whether it actually was the real deal or not. And I actually kind of think it is. I think it's my favorite Arch build. I think it's a deck that keeps other decks really honest. It doesn't, outside of like turn one being able to donk stuff, it doesn't really do anything super flashy. But having that poison buff makes Archer's damage like really respectable. It's always kind of suffered from being at this 220 damage cap, where you've always had to find ways to push that into one shots. And the poison package just does that really well. Also, like I say, opens up the door for you to be able to have cheeky donk games here and there. So yeah, there's a lot to like about this archetype. And yeah, I really think it's doing well. Like it's been really doing like quite well in the online spaces. Quite a lot of top eights, quite a lot of conversions, even quite a lot of wins as well. So it's not just a deck that I think it's quite an easy pick up and play deck. I think there's not too many nuances to it, but I think that's sometimes what you need for some of these early tournaments. You just want a deck that is reliable at doing what it's meant to be doing. The other thing about Arch, which I feel like sometimes it felt a little bit I guess a little bit clunky, and it obviously loses Radiant Greninja and loses its best partner in Dialga. So it's really cool to see Arch still making it. And I think the fact you're able to actually trim down on the Arch package because you have some other options in the deck actually ends up meaning you play more supporters as well. So it doesn't feel anywhere near as clunky as I expected the deck to feel as well. So yeah, it's really impressed me so far. I think there's it's worth noting there are some other Arch builds that have been doing okay. There's the Dunsparce build. There's the recent build that started to see some success, the Zoroark build. Right now, I don't really feel we've got the data for the Zoroark build. I feel like that's the build a lot of people are talking about right now. I don't really think we've got the data to be able to back up it being better than the Poison build at the moment. But I could see it like converting that way. I think this weekend could be a real interesting test for that archetype, to be honest, because it makes a lot of sense having a draw engine in Arch that complements what the deck wants to do anyway. Is pretty respectable. So I think this could be a good weekend for people to try it out. I know there's been a couple of streamers really enjoying it, and it's started to see some results in the online scene as well. So yeah, there's a couple of other builds worth noting, but I think for me, like I say, the Poison build just complements Arch so well. It's not felt like a deck that is super flashy, but it just keeps other decks honest. It wins pretty consistently in 3 or 4 turns. It doesn't really have that like multi-prize potential or anything like that, but it's just forcing your opponent to deal with this massive 300 HP Pokemon that's dealing now up to 260, 280, even 290 a turn, depending on like what buffs you have on your board. So it actually is a decent attacking threat as well. And against some of these like 2 prize decks, you already like kind of up trade into them because you have much more HP than they do, and you're kind of one-shotting each other. So yeah, it's really impressed me. It's nothing crazy, but I think it's just a solid pick early on in the post-rotation meta for sure.
The biggest thing I felt about this is just that even the stage 2 decks feel way more reliant on Pheasantipity early, so just subverting that makes them far, far clunkier. So even if you're not winning with that donk, you're really slowing down their draw potential, and that allows you to have multiple turns of free prizes, which is great, and you naturally subvert Fez for the multi-prize decks, which is still like really important as well. So we think this is going to be quite popular, don't we? We think maybe like 8-9% or above that, do you think?
I think it could push 10, but I could see like I can kind of see it split, or the people that might play this deck kind of being split between this and Raging Bolt. So Raging Bolt might eat up some of its
And Dengo as
percentage. So
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
Dingo as well. Yeah, yeah. Some of these more aggressive decks that just like are just trying to take two prizes turn after turn. So yeah, I think eight's pretty fair. I can see it maybe pushing up to 9 or 10, but I think between those,
Definitely on
they're
the
all going to
graphic.
kind of be
Yeah.
it's they're all going to be eating into each other, and it's we'll probably see maybe two of them on the graphic, and the third might slip down to the second page. But yeah, I think that feels about right.
Just the last point, like you said, we think Poison's probably been the most tested with and the most played with, but I do think just with Terrorbox being so high on the radar, and it's something I'm going to come to next, just being able to go above that 300 threshold is something a lot of these decks are looking to do, whether it's like caping in some of the stage 2 decks or the tankier decks, or whether you can put a rigid band on your arch or something like that, or even the Full Metal Lab I've seen experimented with, like an old school arch that has like Turo and tool buff, whether it's in a Zoro list or not. Like even Dunce can try this, can be quite good into the decks that we think are S tier, as in the pot and the Terror box for spoilers, which not many people are going to be surprised by. So I think Arch can still be that like not impressive on paper, but impressive in the context of the format, just by the fact that 300 is a great baseline, but you can push that even further, which is a huge headache. I am still putting Terrorbox in S tier. Now, it's an interesting one because everyone came out the gates hot saying Terrorbox is the best deck in the game, and we're already seeing in the online scene that that has then entered into the cycle where decks are appearing with new techs and new matchups are going to be emerging that capitalize on this deck being so popular and so prevalent. So I think this is an awkward tournament for the archetype coming into Atlanta because it is so heavily on the radar, in that we could start seeing some Klefki in the stage 2 decks. We could start seeing those hit point puffing archetypes to push yourself out of range of even Pikachu, as long as you're not being hit for weakness. Or yeah, if something is being hit for weakness, like say for example Charizard being KO'd by the Ogerpon, now if they have a Hero's Cape, then suddenly that's a big issue for them. Like all of these things can really offset a deck that is very set on two prize racing. But inherently, even with a bit of counterplay, this deck can also add in different tech cards because you can always knock down for pieces here and there. Now, I don't think tool removal is something you can do, but I think you can have still lots of great ways to ruin engines from opposing Noctowl builds, obviously the evolution decks weeping. I think that's still one of the main things, the main sells, I think, for Terrorbox for me, is that whenever I'm testing Dragapult or Gardevoir, which I've tested the majority of the stage 2 decks, to be honest with you, other than Terrorbox, it feels like you just run away with the game and there's just no recovery at all available for you because Wellspring is so deadly. That's still a big sell for me. And I think that even though there are these counter picks like the tanky Terrapagos deck, I think those aren't as strong into the field. So I think if you can get on a good run with Terrorbox, and obviously this tends towards the higher level expert players because of how intricate of a deck it is, I feel like it can still just go really, really far and has the potential to win any tournament in my book. And I think the online data for this deck is deceptive, similar to how it's been deceptive for top decks like Lost Box in the past, in that it's all pilot driven. And the mistakes that people will make just picking up this deck, I feel like you need literally weeks to start getting this down and fast to do well with it. So even though it's this good, I still think it could be a sub 10% deck in terms of representation. But I still think like it's so powerful in what it can churn out. It uses the best engine in the game by far, and utilizes it in a really aggressive package that can, covers a whole bunch of weaknesses and also it exploits the lack of bench protection, which is just so fundamentally good right now. So I still have to put it in S tier just for its raw power and consistency at what it's trying to do. It's like the best aggressive deck I've really ever seen, I think, in a vacuum into what it can churn out. So do you...
Yeah, when I was gonna say when testing this like pre, or it was like just after UIC, the fact that you can chain, like there's some decks you can just chain attacks on so well. Like it almost feels like more fluid than things like Lost Box have felt at times. Even though you're limited to like one crystal and you have to use Crispin and stuff like that, it still felt just as fluid as some of these box decks that have had an extra 8 cards per turn with Comphase or whatever. So yeah, I think that is, if nothing else, is testament to how strong it is. The meta share is interesting. I think I really don't know how to place this because I think it probably has quite a lot of diehard fans similar to how you feel, Joe, in that like the raw power is something that you just can't put off. And similarly to like Lost Box, there will be people that pick this up as soon as they knew they weren't playing any more post rotation or pre rotation tournaments and have just grinded the life out of this deck and will be able to like see lines that are unbelievable. So and similarly again with Lost Box, I think there'll be people that just pick it up because it's when you get those games where you just play like your turns are just perfect back to back to back. It just feels so fun as well. So I think this will probably I don't know where do you feel?
I'm thinking like
wise?
11 to 12%, something like that. I think
Yeah,
it'll be.
I initially
think
had
12.
about 10, but I think that's I think I can see it being.
Well, let's split the
I can
difference.
see it
Let's
being
go.
up
Let's
there.
go 11. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it being up there. It's I think it almost feels like it's kind of a fan favorite already. So I can see people just sort of picking
It was
it up.
very
and-
popular online, but obviously there's no
Yeah.
stake in those tournaments, and people are practicing. So it's not a one-to-one thing, but there is a
Yeah.
willingness to figure out this deck whether it's a play for them or not. But I also
also-
could easily see people tangenting off to a tanky build with just Terapagos or a Raging Bolt as their like pivoting points if they can't get along with this deck.
Yeah, for sure. I also like looking at the rest of the decks we have to talk about today. Compared, like other than some of the trainer stuff, it's also the most new deck compared to like everything else is kind of an adaptation other than the trainer stuff and I guess Gator, and the walls. So like, I feel like there might also be an element of people being like, okay, post rotation, I actually want to play something new. I've played Dragapult for months and months and months, or I've played Guardy or whatever. Dragapult less so, but Guardy obviously potentially takes a bit of a hit in terms of consistency. So I want to move off of this, and it is like I say, one of the only truly new decks other than the trainers decks. So I could also see that kind of drawing people in as well.
Take your pick.
I think I'm going to take a look at Gold Dengo. It's a deck that I've not played too much in this meta, but again, I kind of touched on it when we were talking about Poison Archery. It's had really impressive results, or like it's got a really impressive like meta percentage against a lot of these decks. I think it falls in that A tier as well. Like I say, I feel like this and Poison Arch and Raging Bolt all kind of will be eating up into each other's percentage a little bit because they all feel like the natural aggressive decks of the format compared to like the stage 2 decks, or I guess Terror Box is an aggressive deck, but yeah, this in like a different way. This is a very much hit whatever's in the active and just deal a huge amount of damage to it. I don't think it's been hurt anywhere near as much at the loss of Greninja as I first thought it was going to be. It looks like it's just building up. Like it's got a more robust support account now, which makes a lot of sense. But other than that, like once you get your Goldengos out, your draw engine is completely fine because for the most part you're going to be drawing a couple of bonus cards per turn. It's typically seen with the Dunsparce as well, so that's like kind of a nice extra supplementary draw. The Dunsparce also opens you up to the EX as well. I think one of the biggest problems with this deck is actually dealing with the random cornerstones that keep popping up in decks right now, because it's like Cornerstone feels like it's one of those things that can literally pop up in like 50-60% of decks at the moment. It's just everywhere. So you do have like backdoor answers to that as well. I don't really feel like there's anything flashy about the list though. Like the lists are all pretty standard. They're all back to Energy Search Pro. They're all trying to just do the consistent thing of taking 2/2/2 every turn. Similar to what you said, I feel like it can sometimes try and abuse things like Fezzes and Mews that are coming into decks right now. Even some of the other like 2 prizes like the Lily's Clefairy, like if they end up on the board, they're really nice easy prizes to take. So I feel like it's just a really nice racing deck. I think it sometimes struggles with some of the evolution decks, because again you don't always have that like backup consistency. And the Dunsparce is great, but it's a weird like front loading of resources where you can have these crazy turns where you draw like 10 cards through coin bonus and the Dunsparce and stuff. But then if you're not able to draw yourself back into like the Dunsparces, you can then have like a couple of like whiff turns or fizzle turns where you don't really draw too much and you're really relying on the couple of cards from Goldengo to carry on chaining knockouts. So I think it can struggle sometimes into those. But yeah, in general, it feels like another of these aggressive decks that is just pretty consistent at what it does. I personally prefer Poison Arch, but I think Goldengo probably has better matchups across the board for the most part. So I think it's slightly higher than Poison Arch, but that's just a personal preference for me. But yeah, it's impressed me in terms of how well it's adapted to this meta. Even though Greninja's only 1 card, it was such a fundamental card to the deck. I was kind of, and obviously that spawned its own archetype with like the Palkia side of things as well. So I was really interested to see how it kind of fit in. But it seems to have landed on its feet, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it feels quite fair, but it's just draw power plus draw power now, and that's just like pretty good at trying to get what it does. Do we think
Yeah.
it's going to be less? I think it's going to be slightly less popular than Poison Arch, maybe around that 6%, something like that.
Yeah, I think it probably will be. It feels like these two are always competing to be like the bottom end of the day one graphic. It's either Goldengo or Archer, stuff like that. So yeah, I think it could be anywhere between. I think any of these could all be between like 6 and 8. I feel like it's
Let's go
it's
6.
somewhere around there.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'm gonna pick up Raging Bolt. For me, it's if you can't handle the strain of Terrabox, Raging Bolt is definitely not as good as the deck. But it's like the ease of playing this deck comparatively to Terrabox could easily spike your win rate way higher than if you are not able to play Terrabox to of its full capacity. Raging Bolt will have that higher win rate for you. So that's not like a dig at a player at all, because Terrabox, I've been playing for 15 years and I still have brain aneurysms after 2 hours of Terrabox. Like, it's such a difficult deck to play perfectly and you will get punished. Whereas Raging Bolt creates difficult positions for decks in a similar capacity, but doesn't quite have the same like options that Terrabox has, and it's just so much freaking easier to play because rather than using Crispin every turn and just relying on exactly what's in hand and making the most out of those resources, Raging Bolt has the fallback of Sada, you drawing new cards, and your split of attackers are a little bit more down to, just big damage from the EX or trying to use some of your single prizes for various situations. Like, those are your two big options. But I think that's still really solid. Like, still having Fan Rotom is amazing. Having either Coridon or Slitherwing to be a one prize Fez KO option at any point in the game is always good right now. Forcing your opponent to have answers here and there is good. And I think even just having hit point buffing tools is important. If you want to attack against Poison Arch, you can easily add to the Ancient Booster, even as a one-of, because you play a Noctowl engine, and that can completely swing a game. So, yeah, I think this is definitely solid. It's below Terrabox just because Wellspring is so OP, but I think in terms of ease of play and still getting a lot that you get out of the S-tier deck, still makes me think this is like definitely a reasonable choice. For a lot of players, to be honest. And this could be the training wheels that can get you towards Terrabox as well. So there could be people who play this for Atlanta with their eye on Terrabox in like a future tournament. But this is definitely like the training wheels Noctowl deck, in my opinion. And again, I'm not trying to say that to like slag anyone off here. I completely understand why you would want to play this at majors, because it is simply easier to achieve your goal for a large portion of the player base, I would say, with this deck.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of fallen in a meta where there is, if played optimally, there is a deck that is just infinitely better than it. But playing that deck optimally is so hard that actually the percentage points you lose in trying to play that deck in like, one misstep with a Noctowl can lose you the game. Like, that's a lot harder to do when you're also drawing 3 a turn with Sada, plus then also you have the backup of extra Teal Mouse Gogopon draws and stuff like that. So yeah, it feels like you say like another aggressive deck that is outshone by the best aggressive deck in the format, but the best aggressive deck in the format is not one that everybody will want to play. In terms of meta percentage, I feel like this is going to fall again pretty similar to Goldengo and Poison Arch, somewhere between 6 and 8.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
like it at 6. Yeah.
I feel like it's between these 3 decks, they're all going to make up 20 to 22%. I'm not necessarily sold on like what that split will be, but yeah, I think that this feels pretty right in terms of the people that are going to be like the number of people that are going to be playing it around that 6% mark.
And just that final note, sorry, before we head off, that final note of like people playing around the specific numbers of Terrabox, you subvert that by playing Raging Bolt by just going, haha, I'll remove an extra energy, idiot.
Yeah, yeah.
So
there is nothing. Yeah, there's nothing out of range. You're not bothered about these like tanky arch builds or these stage 2s or whatever. You don't need to worry about getting the right weaknesses. You're literally just doing as much damage as you can per turn, and
exactly.
Like even just having Noctowl to be able to smooth that flow, and you're not just relying on the raw draw that the deck used to play is actually so nice as well. So yeah, it's definitely a buff, I think.
Certainly.
I'm gonna take a look at the Walls deck. We've got a few different ways of playing Walls, but I'm gonna take a look at the Mimikyu Ogerpon deck. We're actually gonna put this in C, pretty much because for a couple of reasons. One, as with these Wall decks, there's always the graph of how popular they are compared to how much people are respecting them and stuff like that. And it still feels like people are respecting these partly because of their success continued success in Japan, partly because there's multiple ways of like I mentioned, there's a lot of cornerstone in anyway in decks right now. There's other ways of playing these kinds of strategies. We feel like the pure walls deck is kind of the weakest one, because they don't have as many tools as things like the for alligator or even the frostlass deck in terms of like trapping strategies and stuff. And also that coupled with the fact that people I think will still be respecting these right now, even though they really haven't been showing up in online results. I feel like people are still going to be respecting them because one, it's the first tournament of the meta, but two, again, we literally just had a Champions League where there was one that it at least made top 8, it might have made top 4. I can't remember where it finished, but it was like a respectable finish again.
Yeah.
So like it's not like it's completely gone from people's minds. So I think for this tournament, they seem like quite a low pick. I think arguably they're potentially more consistent than the other couple of Stally style decks we have on the list. But I think that also like that consistency also comes with a much more linear game plan of I'm just going to throw the wall at them that would like whatever wall they seem to struggle with. And if people are teching for those, it's a much easier strategy to get around. Whereas with things like for alligator and frostlass, when you're trying to trap things, there's much more finite ways of like finite terms of like switching cards and stuff like that in decks right now. I feel like that's kind of going to be where people are cutting cards rather than just having ways of getting through some of these walls. Because again, it feels like one of the biggest talking points of post rotation was how successful these wall sets were to begin with. So it's not like these have gone under the radar. So yeah, they're in kind of a weird spot. I think I could still see them being like not super popular, but still played into a capacity because again, there will be people, one, that kind of diehard them, but two, are happy to just roll the dice and say I'm hoping to hit people who haven't respected them. So I could still see them like being relatively popular in terms of like maybe making the best of the rest graphic. But yeah, I think there's a couple of other better options right now. Frostlass is kind of an upper or a newer, a more up and coming like revelation over the past couple of weeks. But I've always quite enjoyed the gameplay for Alligator. It feels like no other deck in the format. It's really bizarre, but it's really cool. So I've always kind of stand for Alligator over the Walls decks anyway. And I still don't feel Relegated in a great place either. But yeah, I think it's probably the weakest of the stalling archetypes. I don't know about percentage though. I could see it maybe breaking that like 4-5% at the bottom.
Oof.
That might be a little bit high. That might be it. That might end up being like across the multitude of different stall decks. It could actually end up only being like a 2 or a 3 for this specific like archetype.
I'm kind of leaning towards more 2 or 3%. We can give it the 3 because you're all a little bit higher than my sort of estimation. And again, this isn't just us saying Mimikyu Ogapon. This is our umbrella of like if it's going to be basically like a Crispin attackers deck, whether it's the for Rigarath or whether it's the Milotic or whatever else. You know, this is like a attacking wall. You know, mist energy, all that nonsense, and the capes and that sort of stuff. So that's our umbrella there. But we are putting Gator and Frostlass Monkey in slightly different buckets. I think I'm actually going to mention Gator because obviously it's got that high-profile win, but it really hasn't had great follow-ups in the online spaces. Again, this was a deck that surprised the metagame by the looks of things, where it has corner trapping shenanigans, it has hit and run into walls when need be, and importantly, it can be a deck that caters towards and can force its own Monkey Dory math. And in many situations, the best board state, similar to like a Gardevoir, is 2 to 3 monkeys powered up. And sometimes you're just using for Alligator's ability to charge up monkey math for you to then like continue to corner trap or to attack with a budgie or something along those lines and set up your prize race. We think it's more versatile than a pure walls, but because walling is still one of the more fundamental win conditions of the deck, I still have to put it in that C tier. It also feels like sometimes you're really just holding on tight to get that corner trap off. And we know that the Terror boxes are so good at taking multi-prize knockouts that like even them just playing like that one Turo and whatnot can really railroad you at times from as far as I can tell. And it also feels like, just personally, I feel like Milotic is probably the cut right now. I probably want to claim those spaces back for consistency as best I can, because I'm very worried about the shakiness of this deck's setup. I've tried a couple different ways, and it still does concern me that little bit. But I think Gator maybe like the 2%, something like that. I don't see it being that popular. It got that high-profile win, so I think everyone's tried it probably. But to sort of varied success right now, really not that groundbreaking.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Again, it feels like it's it feels like it's got such a unique play style. I could see a couple of people just committing to it. But yeah, it feels like it's not quite translated as well.
Hmm.
I guess what I'll talk about the other one. I'll talk about Frostlass Monkey Dory again, a deck that I've played against more than I've played with.
Sure.
I must admit, but yeah, I've hit it a few times on the ladder recently. Really feels like it's a deck that's trying to abuse all of these Noctowls right now, to be honest, because it can deal really well against like a board of a couple of Noctowls, but also there's just a lot of good abilities in the format right now. So Frostlass kind of sweeps them up, and we've said from the start, I think the whole rhetoric of this post rotation format has been how good Monkey Dory is, and this feels like it's the deck that abuses it just as well as some of the other like bigger decks like Gardevoir and stuff. So yeah, it's obviously a deck that's always been kind of a bit rogue. It's been in a known capacity, but never really had major success. I think it's probably in its best form right now. I think naturally with a bit of a smaller card pool, you've ended up with like just the amount of cards that we have in format. You've ended up with a pretty consistent 60 because there's only so many good cards right now that you actually end up playing a very similar 60 to a lot of other like core archetypes. So your deck is just feels better than it used to because there's like every other deck kind of runs the same engine. So that's quite nice. And yeah, like I mentioned, there's some trapping strategies that the deck can do now that naturally fit in slightly well or slightly better than some of the other ones have in the past. So yeah, I think it's probably the best of the three. Like I say, I really think it abuses some of these go wide decks right now. Frostlass, like multiple Frostlasses on the board, is actually quite scary quite quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you have that also paired with the Monkey Dories, like peppering the right things at the right time, so yeah, like they're able to chain a couple of KOs here and there. Yeah, it's pretty scary, particularly like I say for the Noctowl decks. I don't think we have like masses and masses of data to back up how it does against some of these other archetypes, which I think is probably the biggest question mark for me. Is that how it like it really feels like not necessarily a flash in the pan success right now, but like it's really come on in the past couple of days how like popular it's been and whether it can be a top tier contender. So I still feel like this is going to fall into that like 2-3 range. I don't think there's going to be many people
go one, honestly,
committing to it. Yeah, I could even see it being that low, but I could see it. I don't think it will. I think because of the number of people playing things like the Walls, it will probably not see as many day twos. But I could see it having like a couple of quite deep day two runs if they hit the right matchups in the first few rounds and make it into day two. Because yeah, it feels like it's a deck that can definitely punish some of the higher tier decks for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Badoom, Maractus, Blood Moon is like a trio of really annoying Pokemon to deal with. So yeah, very, very decent. I guess I'm going to take on Gardevoir. This is like another big question mark, I think, of the format of... We saw Colia go, everyone's had their one last ride, and oh wait, it's still really, really quite solid, even without trade, which is insane. It does feel very different as a deck, in that it's really just like white knuckling supporters every turn to try and get your candy combo to be an aggressive deck. But fundamentally, it still has Screamtail, it still has Drifloon, and it still has Monkey Dory, which immediately makes it like pretty decent back into Dragapult, especially now with Lily's Clefairy. Mew EX becomes one of your best attackers in the deck, in that you can not only KO Dragapult, but you're also doing monkey math and copying their damage counter placement to be even better than Dragapult in a almost mirror match sort of situation, which is absurd, to be fair. So, yeah, Gardevoir being a bit of a Dragapult bully, a lot more than it used to be, I think, puts it in a really interesting metagame position. We can't have it at the top of our A tier just out of consistency headache, in that if those researches are whiffing the candy combos, or if you've prized your blender, or these sorts of things can be like a big problem for the deck. And there aren't many like great solutions for that, I don't think. I have tried a 2/2 Zoroark list just as a fun anecdote and put the TM Evos back in the deck as a trial. And I actually think that's pretty good, to be fair. But I haven't seen much replication of that from basically anyone. So I can't really expect people to bring it to this tournament unless they've been cooking as well. But I do think the Blunder's like a pretty decent one. I also think Secret Box is pretty decent in the deck as well, to be fair. Just like Box, Blender, and Double Vessel, or even Triple Vessel could be solid. But yeah, you still get the boasts of the deck. So when it draws well turn 1-2, it feels like old times where you didn't need trade in the first place and you just rely on Mew EX and Pheasantipity now. But there are those times where it just feels really, really haywire, and you're still like at a cliff edge trying to counter catch an Iono and hope for the best and just like not trigger Fez. So there are those times that are still a bit nerve-wracking, I think. I feel like the popularity of the deck will probably go down because there's the assumption that it's a worse deck now. The main selling point is that it is really decent into Dragapult, but I think maybe like 5%, something like that. Or do you think that's a little low? I don't know.
I feel like it could end up being, I don't know, because yeah, it does have that stigma of is it just bad now? Do we even bother playing it? The only reason I wonder whether it ends up being slightly higher than 5 is just because it's not bombed online results, and it's not like it didn't bomb at any of the Champions Leagues, right? It's still represented, so I don't know whether people will.
It did just get
might
second
blind
as well.
faith.
Yeah,
and the meta really isn't that different. If you look at that top 16, there's it's basically Shaman is the only new card, right? There's not many other new cards in that top 16, so it's a pretty similar meta. So I could see people almost. It might be too little, too late for this tournament, and they might still be off it. But I could see it I could see it still being maybe that 5-6% this time, but climbing its way back up quite quickly because I think people will start to realize that. I also think it's one of those decks which will probably convert well as well. I think if it has a low play rate overall, I could see it converting quite well, and that being a flip the switch kind of moment for a lot of people that end up going back to it, if that makes sense.
All right, maybe like 7ish then. Do you like where?
Yeah,
I'm at?
let's go 7. I like 7.
Yeah, cool.
I'm gonna take. Let's do Dragapult. We all know where it's going. It's going in the S tier. It's by far the deck that was affected by rotation the least. It lost some very important cards, but it was still able to adapt quite well. I think its presence online has shown that it's still really good. Its presence in City Leagues and Champions Leagues has still shown it's really, really good. So I think to no one's surprise, it's going to be that S tier. The deck, it's really interesting. The deck feels like, for me, it feels like it has that board control similar to when Dust Noir first came out that Charizard had, where it really just plays its own game and it kind of doesn't care what you're doing because it has so much control over the prize mapping, over your hand, over their own hand, over item locking. All of this stuff is so in control for the deck that it really feels like you're always playing to their game plan. And I think the only decks that really seem to be able to push through that, looking at the data, the only decks that really seem to be able to push through that are the decks that just have to, or just say, I'm going to blow up your Dragapult every single turn and I'm going to race you. The Gardevoirs, the Goldengos, the decks that are saying, I'm going to race you. I'm not going to let you have the turns you want to be able to place loads of counters and play with my prizes and my hand and all of this kind of stuff. I'm just going to be going turn after turn, knocking out Dragapults. Everything else is kind of fine for it. It's got a really, really good win rate, obviously, against a lot of the other evolution decks, just because again it has that insane board presence and board manipulation to it. So yeah, I think this is by far going to be the most popular deck. I think it's the best deck in format right now. I think the results back that up as well. I think people, I think not as many decks have adopted Clefairy as I expected, primarily because I think Terrabox came out and kind of swept all of the. This is how we're going to we're going to build around beating the weaknesses of the format in this build, and so I think because of that, there's less decks that have tried to adopt Clefairy, which has probably helped its popularity as well because it's kind of meant that yes, Terrabox has become an archetype, but that means that there's less Clefairy in all of the other decks. That actually there's so many decks you don't need to worry about seeing Clefairy in now. So yeah, it's kind of I think sort of worked out for Dragapult in the end because it's now just all funneled into one archetype or two archetypes for the most part. So yeah, I think this is a really, really powerful archetype. Like I say, I just feel like there's no element of the game that they don't have some element of control over. Whether it's your items, like I say, your items, your hand, anything like that. So yeah, feels super popular. I actually think this is going to be really, really popular as well. I think I could see this definitely breaking maybe even 16-17%. Yeah. I think it's going to be very popular.
Yeah, I'm right with you with that 17, I think. Have you? So I'm on EXP Share Stamp. Are you Stamp gaming or Crystal gaming? Crystal just won the Champions League, but
yeah. So I think my initial list had Stamp. I haven't played too much of it recently, but I have no reason to move off of it. I felt a little bit weird cutting Crystal because it felt so important for getting that turn to Dragapult, but actually. This is actually not necessarily a rotation decision, but it's kind of a prismatic decision. Now the deck is so much happier going Budju and just building a border full of Dracloaks. Yeah. You have an extra turn in the game anyway. That I think you need Crystal way less. arguably it would help against some of the decks that are racing you like 2 for 2 every turn, but equally I think Stamp really helps those as well. So it's kind of a trade-off. So yeah, I'd probably stick with Stamp too.
Yeah, I'm stamped mostly just for Terrorbox Fear, just for reference
Yeah,
for
makes a
anyone.
lot of sense.
That's all it is,
Yeah.
really.
And Stamp obviously feels kind of weird against some of the decks that have raw draw on the board, but yeah, against Terrorbox, you need like they need to hit one of their handful of Noctowls or whatever to get back into the game. Otherwise, again, you get like you just having an extra turn against anything with Dragapult, it just feels disgusting because it's like I say, it's so much board control right now.
So we've mentioned Dragapult Dust Noir, we've mentioned Dengo, so we'll just get a Golden Go Pulse in that sort of lower B tier. I think there was a reason for this to be a deck in Japan. Again, it had like 1 or 2 spikes in Champions Leagues, but I think the Wallstall propaganda kind of deal is being dealt by so many of the top tier stuff now that this doesn't really have that Superman situation of like Golden Go covers the things that Walls pult and vice versa. I think that was still the main sell of the deck because I think you don't have the same control that Dust Noir can give you. You don't have the same burst potential that a straight Golden Go can give you. Even though these are both draw Pokemon, so it never feels that bad that they're combined together, it still feels worse than the sort of sum of its parts. So I think this is going to be like a 1 or 2% deck and not that powerful. It's one of those things where there could be niches for the format where you have to kind of shrug and be like, oh, I can't play pure Pult this weekend because there will be Wallstall or whatever else. And there might same thing for Dengo, right? If you're playing pure Dengo, sure you have Strike It Rich or you have Dedunce, but Pult is also there as like a backup attacking mon that can draw cards, and I think it might be better just being stage 1s anyway. So that's stuff to sort of reconcile for the deck. So we're just going to pop it in B.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to take a look at Hopzation. This is a really interesting one because I think this was by far the most popular deck post rotation just happening on ladder. I'm pretty sure it's because everyone is given Zation, so it was the easiest thing the easiest new thing to play. I think this is a C tier deck. I really struggle to see like after turn 3 or 4 this deck really being able to do anything. It feels like it can have a super aggressive start. I don't think it's that out of the realms of possibility for it to be dealing potentially even that 120-30. Like it happens. It's not uncommon. It happens like relatively consistently. And Hop's Cramorant is obviously still an insane card. It's very, very good. Every time I've played against this though, it feels like as soon as you're down to 2 prizes, you can completely take your foot off the gas because they just have nothing left. It's like, I don't know, it just feels like super, super weak in the late game. So I think the only real games this wins are the ones where your opponent has a slow start anyway. And obviously, like if they're the games you're winning, there's probably other decks that might be able to take advantage of that more. The Raging Bolts, the Terror Boxes, stuff like that. So it feels like again, it's one of these decks that just doesn't do what it's trying to do as good as some of the other decks in the format. I think there's a couple of interesting things about it. Like I say, it seems like this Monkey Dory build is really rising in popularity. That looks like it's the common way to play. It kind of was towards the end of the Japanese results, and it's translated pretty well over here in the first couple of weeks. So I think that is the way to play it. And again, when you're playing cards like Monkey Dory and Hop's Cramorant, which can do like 210 for free, is just absurd. Like playing all of these cards in your deck ultimately means that you're going to be winning. You're going to be winning at an amount of games, a capacity of games, no matter what. So it can't really be like you can't not consider this deck, I guess, in a way, because there's just like inherent strong cards in the archetype. But yeah, I really feel like whenever I've been playing this deck, even with decks that I really feel like they've had a turn 1 KO with a Zacian, I've been able to respond. They've then had a turn 2 like 2 prize KO with a Cramorant. I really feel like once you get down to that 2 prize mark, you have so much time against them. So I don't know whether it's like even Ursaluna, like the decks play Ursaluna, but even that doesn't feel like it does enough.
Right.
So yeah, I really feel like the deck needs to solve that late game answer. I don't know whether it's actually something along the lines of like disruption, like a stamp or something instead. I don't really know. Nothing really makes sense. I know, Joe, you played against a stamp build, which was pretty scary.
It's the only game I've lost to this deck.
Yeah,
I think it is fake farm deck, honestly. Yeah, I think this deck is really poor, but the unfair stamp jump scale was literally the only time I've lost to this deck. So
yeah, it feels like it needs that to, like I say, it feels like it has no way of closing out games right now, other than games where your opponents want to go slow anyway. And I even think there's other decks that do that close out games better, like Poison Arch.
Yeah.
I think that closes out games better a lot of the time anyway. So
it just the fundamental
yeah.
of being happy that your 2 prizes taking a 1 prize KO, like the 30 damage bench, it's just not a big enough selling point. You're like fundamentally doing what your opponent wants you to do, which is initiate a prize race with a 2 prizer in the active, taking a single prize KO. That's like you're trained not to do that with basically every other deck in the game. It's like you're trolling if you're putting yourself in that position, because you're giving your opponent countercatcher if they want it. You're giving them Fez immediately. You're letting them like start to Iona you or do whatever else. You're just making all of the cards in their deck better, and you're opening yourself up for them to be on a 2/2 map, because yes, you have Snorlax as attacker and Cram as an attacker. Sometimes you can force the 6 prize game against them, but a lot of the time you need to put Fez and Tipsy down, or you need Blood Moon, because like you said, Jack, it fizzles if they avoid the Cram, or if they make some other interesting plays. Or if they like get in on the Snorlax just to get it gone, that sort of thing. You can really just be lacking and have those turns of feeling like you've wasted it by just doing like a 90-30, and you're like, why am I not doing 206 counters on the bench or something?
Yeah, I don't like comparing archetypes to past archetypes too much, but I was like, when I was underwhelmed by this, I was trying to think back to like the Buzz era or the Buzzgarb era, and like I was trying to work out what it was missing, and the fact that fundamentally the deck isn't built the same way, that like the fact that the first attack on Zacian is free or like colorless means that you don't have to play metals, which means that you're never attacking with the second attack, which Buzz always had the opportunity to.
Yeah.
But similarly, Baby Buzz also had a second mode where after you'd hit that 4 prize turn or whatever, you then still had an option plus other damage mods to be able to do it. Like at the moment, your Cramrats just become useless.
Yeah.
They end up sitting on your board and doing nothing, whereas Buzz at least had a second mode, which was nowhere near as good, but it was at least doing something.
Yeah.
Whereas this just feels like it's taken all of the good parts, but some of the broken parts about the Buzz deck was the fact that it didn't switch off and it didn't fizzle. And this deck doesn't have that. It just does all the broken stuff that Buzz did, but actually it's a lot less broken when you can play around it and you're not worrying about them then using swing around or whatever. So it's really weird. It's got all the highlights and all of the scary things that those decks had, but it still feels so much worse.
I feel like it's going to have an inflated play rate, though. I think like 3 or 4%, honestly, because it's online. Like maybe I'm underestimating our more core players, but I think like easy 3% here.
I could see it. Yeah, I could see it hitting 3%. I can't say I've seen the one thing about it is.
Or was it just?
I think it's had a super high play rate.
Yeah, like
I feel like it's had a super high play rate, but I just don't feel like I haven't seen it winning or even like going deep into any tournaments whatsoever.
No, it certainly hasn't. Jack. Certainly hasn't.
Which is why I wonder whether people will have like.
Understood.
It feels like a great ladder pick, a terrible tournament pick, if that makes sense. It's super good at grinding games on ladder because sometimes you'll just cheese them with like Zacians and Crams and stuff. But as soon as you have to play a best of 3 with this deck, like you could win the first game and I still think feasibly lose the next 2 because your opponent realizes they just need to dodge Cram.
Right.
And then like it feels like a super weird tournament pick at least.
Cool. I'm gonna talk about Charizard. Charizard has had to forego Pidgeot, or at least play a 101 Pidgeot now in a Noctowl deck. So you're yoinking an engine, but you can easily still have Dusknoir there. You're using Terapagos as a potential early game attacker as well as a Terra activator for your Noctowl. And I think this is an interesting archetype. Yes, I fear Dragapult Dusknoir, and that's the reason why we can't put it any higher than B tier. But there are so many decks in the format now that are formulaically going for the 2/2/2 that we talk about so often. If you're not Polt and you're not Gardevoir, you're basically always finding a 2/2/2 for the other decks at the top. And because Charizard still has... Well, Noctowl can help you find the turn 2, or whenever you need it, the Dusknoir combo. But also, this is still a deck that can boast Briar better than pretty much anything else. So the fact that you laugh at the 2/2/2 map that many other decks can't avoid going around just really makes this deck pretty powerful for me. I think this is like a dodge Dragapult and like squeak into day 2 but never actually make top 8. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. You still use like a great engine and you can still easily convert to day 2 with this. And it's still Charizard, which still has its boasts. I haven't played enough of this to give you like a great list or anything yet. That's still like on my radar, but I can definitely see the logic around this pick because we've had certainly worse decks to play, which is like Dodge, the best deck in the game. I suppose also like Terror Box is slightly awkward because they can, burn through some of your stuff as well, and there's still the Budju headache. But I feel like this is like probably not going to be highly played. Like I'm thinking like 3-4%, something like that. But I do think that it boasts Briar better than the other decks, gives it like a selling point in the game right now, enough to put it in B tier for me.
Yeah, I like that. Ends Zoroark. I think this is unfortunately also going to fall in that C tier for me. Yeah, trade is great. Trade is really good. Turns out you have a lot less Well, to be honest, having Mew VMAX's attack is really good. The problem is the attackers we have aren't great. Well, even though they're actually kind of good, but they're super limited in what they can do. They're super time specific. There's no real like burst potential with this deck. It feels like it's really playing resource wars against a lot of decks, and I think there's decks that just do that so much better right now. There's decks that get so much more value out of their resources. Terror Box, even some of like the Poison Arch builds, like don't necessarily get more of their resources, but they just do it so much easier, so much more consistently. It's like a very sustainable damage output every turn, whereas it always feels like you're going through hoops with Zoroark. You do boast a really good draw engine. I think that's one of the best things is obviously just having trade means that you're so much more immune to things like late game Ionos and unfair stamps and stuff like that, because you're actually able to filter the deck so much more. But yeah, I feel like Darmanitan's kind of ended up caught in the crossfire of how good Terror Box is. That it's like people are kind of aware of it, and there's not really much we can do right now. But it just feels like the meta's been built around that fact, and like we still have Dragapult Dusknoir, I guess, but some of these other like 2-prize decks aren't worried about this kind of attack from the Darmanitan. So yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of fallen out of favor, I think. I think people were really excited about seeing Zoroark back, but I just think it's got such a passive damage output. It doesn't feel like it always feels like you're chasing your tail. You're trying to catch up with the opponent. And when we have, like I say, we have so many decks that feel like they have so much control over the board, over the damage and stuff like that. I feel like there's not many selling points outside of the draw engine for this archetype right now. I don't really feel like it's converted too well in tournaments. It has like an okay couple of matchups, but even like it doesn't even feel like people are playing it really either. I feel like it had that super early hype when the set first came out, but even now, just in the past few days, I feel like people have really dropped off of this archetype. So yeah, it's not impressed me overall. It feels like it does some pretty cool things, but nothing it does is as good as any of the other decks that can do them. Things like Arven engines are better in other decks. Things like Counter Catcher plus Stamp is better in other decks. So yeah, there's nothing that like sells me on this archetype anymore, which is a shame. Even other decks have better draw engines. So yeah, I think the fact that it just has such a flimsy and weak damage output, even with like the Mochi Petrarunt combo, it's still pretty weak in terms of its damage output. And it trades into some 2-prizes for sure, but there's other 2-prizes that they're just happy to wall it, and even like take trades against it. Yeah, so it feels super passive, super uninspiring. Unfortunately, I think Zoroark's kind of fallen flat this time.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. It has those options, but most things you can point to that it can do, other things can do better. Like, it's not as consistent at getting Budju into the active. It's not as consistent at getting that turn 2 snipe that a Terror Box will always do because it's picking its cards out of the deck. We're not even seeing like Cypher Maniac within the list. It's normally utilizing other supporter cards, so you can't like get that reversal plus Defiance Band combination that you often need for the Darmanitan to do its like good work of taking a 3-prize KO into some of these things, like with taking out an Ogerpon in the active and plus something on the bench, like a Hoot. I feel like that's really important for the deck. And yes, it's an Iono deck, but it very often has to attack and take a KO, whereas like the Pult and the Gardevoir can attack and not take KOs to actually make the Iono work all the time. So it's really stuck between, it's having an identity crisis right now. I'd really like to see a list formed that can get around some of these issues. I've been trying a list with multiple Mochi and Perilous Jungle, similar to how the Poison Arch is working, not quite as donk focused, but having Petrarunt as a pass option to take those initial prizes, and having the jungle to push that Zoromath. That's something that's intriguing to me. But it's still so hard to look past, like, oh, I'll draw two and hope they're good, versus I'll Noctowl and find the two best cards I need for the situation. It's like such a hard sell for me that so many of the other top decks in the format are cherry picking, whereas you're
Yeah.
punting with trade, which is such a weird thing to say. I think the popularity is still maybe there, so I think like 3% maybe
Yeah,
for
I
the
can see
deck.
this falling. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
let,
I don't
let,
mind that.
let me just mention another Noctowl engine. Again, it's kind of like overshadowed by other Noctowl stuff, but really the Flareon Noctowl is not that bad actually compared to Terrabox. It feels like you have similar to Raging Bolt in a way as well, where it's like slightly less options than Terrabox, but in this case, the Flareon deck actually has more ball search to get you in the game than a Terrabox, because you get to play Terra Orbs, which gets you both Eevee or your Flareon. You also have multiple Buddy Buddy Poffin. That's one thing Terrabox can barely afford. Like, you're lucky to squeeze one Poffin into a Terrabox, whereas this deck gets to play like three quite consistently, which gets you Fan Rotom, which gets you your attacker in addition to your Hoot. So you're not having to constantly trade off between, do I get this, that, or the other? You're getting both at the same time. So very frequently, this deck full benches immediately. You have some decent type coverage. You know, Sylveon can be a type coverage mon, but it can also create really weird puzzles for opponents, and you can get yourself out of really weird positions as well by having Angelite at your disposal, which I don't think people are estimating well enough, because this is surprisingly unpopular online. I was looking at its data on Play Limitless. This is less played than Mamoswine in the online sphere. So, like, this is a really underrated deck right now for the strength of its engine and the uniqueness of Angelite that people will definitely underestimate. So I'm actually kind of like high on this deck, even though it's just B tier right now. We haven't seen enough from it, and possibly again it's still just worse than Terrabox and can't easily, like, yes, you can still play the Wellspring in your deck, but it's going to do it worse than Terrabox the majority of the time, and you're still limited with Flareon. Like, sometimes the fact that you can't attack next turn is really annoying. Sometimes the fact that you need like Black Belt to actually do the number that you want to is annoying. There are these headaches of Flareon, no doubt, but that create, like, I still keep looking at that Angelite as such an interesting way to get yourself out of trouble against a lot of these decks. Because, like, think of Poison Arch, they are so frequently just having one attacker and one bench because they have all the other poison stuff on their bench. Sometimes the Dragapult as well, you can pick up multiple things. Gardevoir, you can pick up multiple things. You can really leave things stranded and buy yourself so many turns. And obviously, at the very worst, Sylveon is an attacker into Dragapult because you have that Liz Clefairy as well very frequently. So, yeah, there's a lot that I do like about the deck. Definitely underexplored. And again, I'm a sucker for Fan Rotom, and this is a deck that just plays more ball search cards than Terrabox. So, yeah, you actually get into the game a good amount of times. I feel like it's probably, again, underplayed. Like I said, if it's
Yeah.
seeing less play than Mamoswine, it's absurd that people are
Yeah.
like, not looking at this deck closely enough. But again, the same point as Raging Bolt, where this does different numbers to Terrabox. That is kind of intriguing in terms of the decks trying to counter Terrabox. You can get around it sometimes with the Flareon build.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also gonna have a super low play rate. I'm pretty happy with that 2%. I can see us seeing it on stream and being like, oh, where has this come from? Where actually it's a deck that has like had murmurs and stuff. So yeah, it's a really interesting archetype. So that leaves me with Terrapagos Noctowl. I feel like this deck has kind of been the talk of the town for the past week or so. And I actually think this is, yeah, a really impressive deck. I'm going to put it in that A tier. It feels like it does a couple of things really, really well. Because it plays that Lily's Clefairy and naturally counters Dragapult quite well. You're able to play the Bufferland package, which is kind of our only way of protecting Hoots right now, which means it has a bit of a one-up against some of these other sniping decks as well, but also makes Terrapagos really tanky, which can be quite annoying. And you can also then like supplement that with things like Monkey Dory to become even tankier, and things like Bravery Charm. You actually can quite easily last a couple of hits with Terrapagos right now, which is pretty nice because the deck has kind of moved away from the combo-based Terrapagos Noctowl build we used to see with Dusknoir. Now it pretty much is a fair, fair like trade 2-for-2 kind of deck, unless you're a Lily's Clefairy hitting into a Dragapult, because that doesn't really work against them. So you have to have another win con against those. But it feels like it's a pretty consistent 2-for-2 trade deck, but you have the backup of having Monkey Dory being able to take a cheeky prize throughout the game here and there just to edge yourself closer to victory, as well as Terrapagos, again, just being tanky enough to be able to take a hit and then churro or scoop up cyclone or whatever it like back into your hand if you're playing the scoop up cyclone, and able to like reset your opponent by a turn, which is really really nice. Also has access to, or it's a deck that plays Cornerstone, which, like I mentioned at the start of the video, can be a bit of a headache for a lot of decks right now. I think there's enough respect for Cornerstone right now where people will be respecting it, but even so, like forcing them to have that in play, getting that on the board is really important. So yeah, it's really nice that it's able to play that. And yeah, it kind of beats up on Terrorbox quite nicely. It actually does pretty well into a lot of the S and A tier decks. I think it struggles with some of the lower stuff, but it really performs well in the decks we expect to be the most popular ones, which is why we've rated it so highly in that A tier, because it feels like a real counter meta pick right now, even though it's kind of becoming meta itself. It feels like it deals with Dragapult, it deals with Terrorbox, it deals with a lot of these decks quite well. And it's not like, again, similar to that Flareon or the Raging Bolt, it doesn't feel like it has super like thought intensive decisions compared to Terrorbox. You are pretty much still playing a Crispin engine, but there's a little bit less pressure on finding Crispin every turn because you're able to tank a little bit. So you have naturally more draw supporters in the deck anyway to be able to refresh the hand and see a few more cards and try and work out like what your following turns are, rather than having to piece them together from Noctowl's turn after turn. So again, it feels like a Terrorbox deck that has a little bit more room to breathe, probably has a little lower of a skill ceiling and struggles with some of the crazy plays that Terrorbox can make in comparison. But again, it just feels like a pretty fair, like consistent hitting two for two every turn, and yeah, just trying to take advantage of a couple of key weaknesses in the format, like that Kefarian, like that Cornerstone. So yeah, it's a deck that I haven't personally tried yet. I don't know why, because I loved Terrapko's Dust Noir, and it feels like this deck is very different, but in a way it also feels very similar in that it's just trying to use that Noctowl engine to make your two prizes as efficient as possible. So yeah, I really like the outlook of the deck. It's had some pretty decent results as well, and like I say, I feel like it's really been the talk of a lot of people, a lot of content creators. I know Celio's loved this deck recently as well. So I think it's got like the backing behind it, and I'm pretty sure it's not just it's not fake. It feels pretty real. I'm curious to see how many people have adopted it, because again, it feels like it's come up recently enough that people could have adopted it, and it doesn't feel like miles and miles away from Terrapko's decks of the past. But equally, this wasn't a deck that we necessarily came into the format with. I actually remember seeing this list when we did our deck list dump video, and I was like, I really want to try this, and never did. But so it's been out there, but it feels like it's only in the past week or so become popular enough for people to really pay attention. So I'm curious to see what you think in terms of the meta share for this one.
I think probably sub 10 for that reason. I think like 8 or 9%.
I can see it being third most popular. In my mind, it's like between Poison Archer and that. I feel like it's third most popular.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll just give it the 10 then.
Yeah, let's give it 10. 83.
That's the thing. Like there's so many decks that use that Noctowl engine that familiarity is already there for players, I think. And like you said, there's that familiarity with the Pidgeot Dust Noir build for some, and Bouffalant is so obviously powerful right now, in that it's basically the best mana fee that we have against Terrorbox, where you get those down and you protect your Hoots, which is huge, and then it also translates into Pagos tanking Pika if you have Bravery Charm as well, and Terrorbox can't afford any of those tool removal cards. So the fact that you can be awkward for Dragapult and Terrorbox is like an easy boast just out the gate, and then you sort of figure it out against the other stuff, which is kind of weird, but at least you have Noctowl at your side to sort of make it happen. I think this is like really hoping for the narrowest meta, but it has obvious boasts that if you get on a good record, you will stay on a really good record and push through the tournament quite well, just because you'll see more of the top end. So yeah, I think it's rightfully so been like a meta reaction deck, and is pretty good at what it's trying to do now, because it's basically been sculpted to tackle the top stuff, and it does a good job of that, to be fair.
Yeah, for sure. Just I guess final. The only thing I was just going to say off the back of that final closing thought was, learning the Noctowl engine right now actually opens up 5 different decks for you, which is insane. So yeah, that's pretty impressive. It feels like Noctowl has always been good, but it feels like its rotation has super unlocked it, because we have so many less raw draw options right now. Noctowl naturally feels the best it's ever been, but even so, that there was times where Noctowl was super good, but it's still only in one deck. Whereas, now it unlocks like 50% of the top 2 tiers of the format, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, like you said, everything else sort of fell away, and when we can't draw our way out of stuff, you just have to find it. It's all it
Yeah.
is. It's like when Inteleon finally got the
Softball. Yeah.
yeah
The yeah.
the quick shooting and whatever. So yeah, really really powerful deck. Well, engine
Yeah.
that you just it's the reason why these are all the top tier stuff. Like, who would have thought of a 3 or 4 Crispin deck would be one of the best decks in the game? Like, certainly not me. So there you go. I think right
Yeah.
now I'm being really boring on ladder. I'm testing a lot of Dragapult Dusknoir, a lot of Terror Box, and then every now and then I'm trying Gardevoir with Zoroark, and I really want to try Arch with Zoroark as well, because I think foregoing its attacks might just be the best way to unlock this card, and almost seeing it like the best draw engine that we have, like just that can sit on board, is an interesting thought experiment for me to go through, because Dunce has its benefits but also feels kind of cheeks at times. So I want to try and find a way to trade again, because I do think that's still really, really valuable in the game.
Yeah, for sure. If you were to be going to Atlanta tomorrow, Joe, what are you sleeving up?
Probably Dragapult Dusknoir. Very boring, but that's my honest answer, because that's what I've been playing most in Arceus, just trying to get myself up the ladder right now.
Yeah, that's a real shame, because I would probably also say the same. And unfortunately, my answer is the same for what I think is going to win the tournament. I think Dragapult is where I would put my money.
I think Terrabox will win the tournament though, because
that
I
would
think
be cool to see.
I think it gravitates to the best players, and I think if they have the appetite for it, I would love to see a try hard, prize checking genius make it all the way.
I also feel like it's taken a lot of heat recently as well, so it would be nice to see it like not be for nothing, if that makes sense, and it actually prove that it is worth being, like, it is a top tier deck. People should be respecting it, because like I say, I feel like some people have really, really put some heat on it recently. That not necessarily saying it's bad, but saying it's not as good as everyone is saying. So yeah, it would be pretty cool to see it be like, no, watch this. What exactly this deck can do.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like I say, when I was playing it back at EYC, the turns you could chain together, if you did have that freedom of just having Noctowl and not having your hand disrupted, or your opponent like having like whiffing a turn or whatever, just felt disgusting. It was absurd. So yeah, it's pretty gross.
Awesome. Well, we are coming out with a top 10 with the deck list of all this stuff this week as well, before Atlanta, and also going over some more tournament results and whatnot. So that's our full focus for the next few days. So make sure you stick around for the channel. Thanks for watching if you stuck it out this far for our discussion on all things. But yeah, we'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone.